So, Rachel, whenever you're ready.
Okay, so I did the Homeland opening sequence, and here we go.
Air and naval forces of the United States launched a series of strikes against terrorist facilities.
Garbutt Flight 103 crashed into the town of
We
London.
have sanctioned acts of terror in Africa, Europe, the Middle
This
East.
will not stand this aggression against the West.
The relentless pursuit of terror.
We will make no
The
distinction.
USS Cole was attacked while refueling in the port of
This was an act of terrorism. It was a despicable caliber act.
Next time we're gonna swing for you. You want the girl?
Until something stops him.
It was right in front of my eyes.
We must, and we will, remain vigilant with Homeland Law. It's smartest and the dumbest.
I'm not the one who got it wrong. I'm the only one who got it right.
Take them all.
Okay, so a brief overview of the series. It's based on an Israeli series named Prisoner of War, which is about Israeli soldiers who are held as prisoner of wars in Palestine. And the creator of that show, Garbutt, served as an executive producer on Homeland. It centers around a CIA agent named Harry Mattinson seeking to prove that a decorated war hero is a double agent. This decorated war hero was held as prisoner of war in Afghanistan. It debuted on the 2nd of October 2011 on the American cable giant Showtime. And in 2012, it was the Emmy winner for Outstanding Drama Series, Outstanding Actor Damien Lewis, and Outstanding Actress Claire Danes, so it's pretty damn successful. There's a lot of themes that are kind of demonstrated in the sequence. It tries to represent a dream sequence told from the point of view of our protagonist, Harry Mattinson, in which she is kind of seeing all these events that have happened with Brody and seeing kind of things that have happened in her lifetime. And it establishes how her life has been affected growing up watching the War of Terror, starting from Ronald Reagan up until Barack Obama, and how that's affected her life, obviously now being a CIA agent. Her erratic thought process is made through shot composition and editing. It's all quite hectic and a bit feels very like it shouldn't be that way, in a way. The sequence itself features static camera images at the beginning, and then it features the historical footage of presidential speeches, 9/11 footage.
Oh, sorry, Simon, I was just looking for Kiyomi. She's not with you.
No, she'll be in, I think, Alison Baker's old room.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Historical footage of presidents announcing terror attacks and the 9/11 footage, the Afghanistan footage, and then of course shots from the show itself, because that's what this is ultimately going to be about. And it attempts to convey that the world is not black and white through having a black and white colour scheme, which is quite an interesting thought, which I'll come on to later. Anyway. It shows these pictures of Carrie, which are mainly, well, that one's a static, the two are not. The use of the rule of thirds on the bottom image, that's where our eye is naturally drawn to, and she is there, she's our protagonist. The symmetry on the second image, the symmetry often feels quite forced, kind of like it shouldn't be there, and with the hair and the TV, she shouldn't be there, she shouldn't really be doing all this as a young child. Then there's musical footage, which is important because the character's a huge lover of jazz music, and it's the only thing that can calm her down. And the fade, once again, onto the piano, which is something else that is black and white. And generally, we're trying to establish Carrie's character here. There's a sequence featuring Barack Obama, which is an excerpt from his famous We Got Him speech, where he's talking about how the Americans captured Osama bin Laden and killed him. This is interesting because the character on the show, the main villain, if you like, is a Osama bin Laden type character called Abu Mazir. And it kind of pulls in their world into ours. President Obama is flipped, which kind of shows the unsteadiness of battling terrorism. It also presents this idea that we think of him as this great guy, and having him flipped upside down kind of makes us, it feels false, but it also feels like the way the media portrays things is that he is this, there's us and there's them. And this kind of tries to pull us away from that with the fade into the woman who's reporting the exact same story but in a part of the world that we think is being evil, when it's not really like that, it's just certain people. And this is of course part of the political backdrop to the show and the opening. In terms of camera work, there is the use of photographs. These show us, it kind of makes us understand Carrie more and makes her human to us instead of just, I don't know, someone who works for the CIA, someone who's doing good in the world, I guess. There's a shot in the sequence where there's a lack of, it shows she has a board dedicated to capturing this guy Abu Nazir, and it's very out of focus, and that's supposed to show how she's very, though she's focused, everything's not clear to her. It tries to show the lack of clarity. There's this close-up on the open and closed eye, the eye being closed from what's around, and it kind of reinforces this dream sequence. And also in the sequence itself, there's a lot of whether it's a quick cut or a lighting flicker off, it kind of reflects how an eye opens and closes, and that ends with the eye opening, and then we see more footage of the show. All the footage from the show is predominantly close-up and mid-shots, which presents Carrie and Brody as our main characters. It only features them. It's very clear that they're the ones we're going to be following. In terms of shot composition, there is a use of leading lines in the maze, which I'll talk about in a bit, and the use of the rule of thirds, particularly when there's Carrie or Brody, they're often in the third. This footage is of the people running away from the World Trade Center, which is, before this, there's the shot of the car going over the bridge, and the bridge, the leading lines leading towards New York to the devastation, and that's kind of where terrorism in the modern world began, which is a very important point. And then these people running away, it's a wide shot, and it doesn't show them as individuals. It kind of shows how in the war of terror we don't think of people as individual, we think of it as an event. And I think this type of sequence tries to kind of get away from that and get away from this idea that there's them and there's us and they're all just people. In terms of editing, there's use of flips and fades, again to show this idea of us and them. Use of quick and rough cuts gives an insight into Carrie's psyche. She suffers from bipolar disorder, so everything she sees is kind of, she has a lot of ups and downs and it's hectic and it's not clear to her the way it would be to someone who doesn't. The historical footage processes chronologically to show how she's grown up with it. And then there's the usage of the flickering lights I talked about earlier, which is like the eye shutting and closing. And as I said, the entire sequence is in black and white to try and show that the world is not all black and white. There's no clear good guys, there's no clear bad guys, which is very apparent in the series, because Nicholas Brody is a war hero. He's supposed to be a decorated war hero, he's supposed to be a good guy, and he might not be. We don't know. In terms of sound, the soundtrack is jazz. Carrie loves jazz. More just learning about character. Jazz also has a lot of up and downs in the musical kind of way, which reflects her. Music is scattered and hectic, once again, was trying to reflect her. And it's got a use of important audio from the show, which established it as a whole and established the characters, just to kind of give us an insight into what's going to happen. And the voiceovers detailing terrorism against America, just giving us this backdrop to what we shall be following later. In terms of mise en scène, the CIA is clearly established as our setting through the car driving and the close-up on the CIA side. CIA obviously being the people we think of as the good guys, in the Western world, they're helping our battle. The only use of colour is the CIA insignia. And the final shot features Nick Brody looking at the White House and then looking up at the American flag. It shows America is kind of the great, you're looking up at them, and it's arguably the most patriotic thing in the world, which is ironic due to Brody's character being a turned double agent. This is very interesting. It kind of foreshadows the entire show, this game of cat and mouse that Carrie and Brody play. She's trying to discover whether he is this good guy or whether he has been turned and he's planning a terror attack in the US. The leading lines look like they lead to him, but they actually don't, and they go off, which again is just foreshadowing what is to come. There's also the fact that she can't see him, which is ironic due to in the show she puts surveillance into his house. young Carrie has a mask on, which kind of mirrors the Greek myth of a Minotaur, which is, of course, a human with a head, human with a bull's head, who kind of lurks in the background, and you don't really know good or bad, kind of like Brody, which is kind of juxtaposed as it's her. And of course, she's in the role of birds, so that's just drawing her right to her. I think this is my last slide. Yeah, the whole sequence tries to outlines how the media portrays good and bad, and it's really not that clear cut. By flipping them upside down, it kind of makes us think, why they flipped upside down, maybe they aren't the good guys, this is messing with our head. Now, something that I found really interesting was that is the only use of colour in the whole sequence, and I'm probably clutching at straws, but I kind of likened it to when Steven Spielberg used the girl in the red coat in Schindler's List. Apparently it was to show the blood on the hands of the Allies. Maybe that shows the blood on the hands of the CIA, who they've done some questionable things. It's not all good and bad once again. And yeah. Does anyone have any questions?
When you're talking about jazz,
Yes.
it works with her growing up, but do you think it sort of detracts from the whole terrorist thing, or do you think it's two standalone things because jazz and terrorism don't tend to sort of just not matter?
Yeah, I just think this entire sequence is incredibly hectic. It doesn't make there's bits thrown around about everything, and I think it just kind of adds to the idea that this woman doesn't see things clearly. And of course, the jazz music is a big part of her life in the show. It's the only thing that can calm her down. But yeah, it does kind of detract away from the whole terrorism bit. But I don't know.
I don't know if it detracts from me, because the whole sequence for me it feels so fragmented and broken, but the jazz is also fragmented and broken. I mean, we only get a few kind of trumpet signatures, but it almost sounds more like somebody rehearsing than a jazz song. And my kind of feeling about it is more that although we don't kind of associate jazz music with terrorism, we're seeing a very broken portrayal of good and bad and terrorism, and a very broken soundtrack to complement it. So I guess the other question is to flip it around and say what musically could have worked better, or what might have been more cohesive there.
I think in the musical sense it works very well. I thought you were referring to the images of kind of jazz music, but musically it does work because it kind of mirrors what we're seeing. It's instruments that shouldn't really. It doesn't sound like a piece of finished music. It sounds like it's a rough cut kind of thing, and that's kind of what the sequence is as well. It's very rough. It doesn't feel right in a lot of points.
I quite like the way that they've got the images of the musicians mixed in there as well, though, because the whole sequence is very much showing kind of Carrie's fragmentation, the fact that she's unable to separate the kind of the jazz music that she loves so much from, the Bill Clinton speeches and the George Bush Senior speeches and all the rest. The whole thing for her is all completely integrated, even though it's simultaneously broken.
To what extent, looking at regular opening sequences for opening titles for TV shows, to what extent does this actually work? Because personally, if I was shown that, I wouldn't have thought that was an opening title sequence to a TV show. What do you think is good about that as a title sequence, or if you think it works at all as a title sequence?
What would you have thought it was?
I would have thought it was a dream sequence.
I think it is a dream sequence, but the title sequence is told in that way. The show is very protagonist driven by the character of Carrie Mathewson, and I think this entire sequence, it just works because it's her mind, and the show obviously is also about terrorism, and if you're coming into this as someone passive, obviously you're going to know about 9/11, obviously you're going to know about all these things, but it kind of refreshes your memory, and it kind of, when you think about the title sequence, if you watch the title sequence and then watch the show, it makes the show make a lot more sense, because you see all these characters reacting the way they do, and it kind of goes back to the title sequence because of all the things that happen to America.
Even then, you could argue that is the rest of the show like that? Is it as fragmented as it is in the opening sequence? If it's more like a political drama, then you could argue that maybe it should be a little less sort of intensive, a little less quick and fragmented because the rest of the show isn't like that.
Mhm.
I mean, I've not seen it. If it is, then fine. But
It's not, and that's a good point. But then again, I mean, if you think of an opening sequence, I'm thinking of something like True Blood, for example, or Game of Thrones. They don't necessarily reflect the content of the show so much as set the scene. And yeah, I mean, it's a valid point. Absolutely. I think the question is whether it's okay anyway.
Yeah, I get your point.
Yeah.
I think it's a good point. I like it.
worth discussing it later on.
Yeah. Yeah, go for it.
Good.
Awesome.
Excellent. Nice one. That's